If you watch a lot of my videos breaking down big fights, you sometimes see me talk about fighters breaking the rules of fundamental boxing on purpose to land punches and win fights. Things like Canelo Alvarez stepping forward with his rear foot first, or Floyd Mayweather leaning forward with his hands down. These things are interesting tricks that make for interesting videos, but the key things that happened in this fight, Naoya Inoue versus Nery, were pretty basic fundamentals, because after all, the basics are what get you to the top level, and there's a quote that goes, "If you get the basics right, everything else falls into place." That's a famous quote by Lewis. No, not Lennox Lewis, Lewis Pugh.
Who the fuck is that guy?
So many of you may already know that the outside lead foot position, or the outside angle in the orthodox versus southpaw matchup, is an advantageous position to line up the lead hand around the guard and the rear hand up the center line. Well, Nery saw some success in the first round by attacking from the outside angle. Here we see Nery come in with a jab, establishing the outside angle. Since he's now lined up to throw a left hand up the middle, and Inoue is in no position to return fire, Inoue is forced to escape out. Nery then follows him and attacks with another jab from the outside angle. This time Nery follows up with a left hand, and Inoue just barely avoids it by jumping away. We see how Inoue was at the mercy of Nery's attack once Nery established the outside angle. Not only was Nery in position to land his punches, he was out of Inoue's line of fire, since being outside of the lead foot also means he's outside of Inoue's lead shoulder. And here are some more instances of Nery attacking Inoue from the outside angle, and Inoue is forced to try and escape. And here in the knockdown sequence, Nery establishes the outside angle and is so far outside of Inoue's lead foot that Inoue would have to turn to even be able to punch him. However, this is something you do not want to do. Turning on the spot when someone has this position on you is a cardinal sin in boxing and is suicide. Nery is in a position to hit Inoue with either hand, and Inoue would turn right into a punch if he does so. However, we see Inoue do exactly that. We see he turns on the spot to face Nery, and while he's winding up a right hand, Nery clocks him with a left hand that beats him to the punch because Inoue took time to turn on the spot first. So what should Inoue have done differently? The basic escape when someone has the outside angle on you is to step into the space vacated by your opponent before they establish the outside angle on you. You see, Nery was previously here in front of Inoue. Well, as soon as the angle is established, Inoue needs to step his rear foot into the vacated space, preferably ducking his head to avoid the punch while he does it, then pivot to face Nery again, and then he'd be safe. So we see Rigondeaux show us how it's done. And so with Nery constantly getting the dominant outside lead foot position on Inoue in round 1, an adjustment has to be made to counter it. The most effective way to counter this, in my opinion, is to prevent them from being able to establish it in the first place. And one of the basic ways of doing this is controlling the space between you and your opponent by maintaining lead hand dominance. This is the exact adjustment Inoue made going into round 2. But first we notice in these sequences in round 1, Nery was able to establish the outside angle because he first controlled the space with his lead hand. Notice how Inoue left him completely unchecked and essentially surrendered the space between them to Nery, so Nery was able to step in with little resistance to the outside angle. Compare that to round 2 and we immediately see Inoue put a stop to Nery taking control of the space by checking him or hand fighting with his lead hand. Notice he even establishes lead hand dominance by getting his hand on top of Nery's, where gravity is on his side. Should Nery try to attack with that lead hand, Inoue could parry it, and should Inoue decide to attack Nery, his hand will go right over the top of Nery's hand. Most importantly, this prevents Nery from getting the outside angle entirely, as you see they continue to hand fight for 7 seconds before Inoue is the one to attack. Nery was denied the ability to step into an advantageous position. And we see more examples of Inoue denying Nery's offense by using lead hand dominance. And so not only does the lead hand control stop Nery from establishing the dominant angle, but it also acts as a distance check and a warning system. If you stick your arm out and see how far your opponent is from your outstretched glove, you can then tell if they are in striking distance if they move any closer. We see that Inoue's hand control allows him to keep Nery at a comfortable distance, so when Nery does step in to break that distance, Inoue takes equal distance steps back and is able to pull and counter Nery's attack here, leading to the knockdown. Essentially, the lead hand control was the difference between Inoue being at the mercy of Nery's outside angle attacks and being able to control the distance and anticipate Nery's attacks, so he has the space to counter them.
Inoue is starting to anticipate the offense of Nery, and he understands that Nery overcommits at times. He's just taking that half a step, sometimes a full step back to counter.
On top of being a defensive adjustment for Inoue, the lead hand control also acted as Inoue's tool to get his offense going. You see, every time one guy reaches out with their lead hand, the other guy reaches out to meet it. The thing is, they do this over and over, and eventually a rhythm is set at which they reach out to touch gloves. Inoue would take advantage of this by feeling the rhythm that they are touching gloves, then start to reach out again, only to break his rhythm with a punch as he leaves Nery hanging. So Nery was starting to find out that boxing at distance wasn't working out, and neither was lunging at Inoue, so by round 4 he tried to work his way inside to get closer to Inoue and try to break him down with pressure. However, Inoue, with his excellent timing, was catching Nery walking in. By the time Nery did finally get Inoue on the ropes, he quickly finds out that Inoue is also much better on the inside. So here we see it looks like Nery is using his right glove to pin Inoue's guard so he could set up his left hand. This is a very effective form of control on the inside. Inoue knows that the most likely punch to come here at this range is an uppercut, so Inoue beautifully counters it with a left hook. Then we see Inoue automatically roll under a potential right hook counter since it's the most likely punch to come here, but it doesn't come. Inoue doesn't need to see the punch coming to know what is coming. This is a great example of defensive responsibility. But what's really interesting is Nery is guarding his head here, knowing that Inoue is likely to throw another left hook. After all, Inoue's roll under also loads up his left side for a left hook. After a short delay, Nery seems to realize that his body is open for a liver shot, and Nery switches his guard to his body. In almost mind-reading fashion, Inoue is one step ahead and shoots his left hook high to the now open head, as if he anticipated Nery to switch his guard. This knockdown softened Nery enough for Inoue to break him down and go for the kill, and this trickery of throwing the punch where the guard is instead of where the opening is reminds me of a tennis strategy where you hit the ball where your opponent is instead of the opening. And that's going to do it for this one. Of course, if this gets taken down by copyright for some reason, you'll find this on my Patreon. And thank you to all my GOAT tier patrons, as always: Jason Maheenan, Grant Gabriel, Albert Chen, Goss Staligeza, Marshall Bott, Jesus Galindo, Nyan Valdez, MSM Neil, and Kashif Zaman, as well as my channel member Lucas Miller. You guys keep the channel going, and I'll see you all in the next one.